been hearing a lot about police reform, and supposedly we had Democrats that were gonna do something about it. Turns out, no, they've completely dropped the notion of reforming police. But let's talk about why local police departments have become as brutal as they have been, and how they become more and more militarized year after year. Police in Iowa have been using a massive mine-resistant military vehicle to intimidate protesters and also to do things like serve warrants. Think about that. They're using military vehicles to serve warrants and to intimidate protesters who are supposed to be protected under our First Amendment. But when the Johnson County Sheriff's Office obtained that military vehicle, they told the community, and they also told the Pentagon, where they obtained that vehicle, that they needed it to help the community in the event of an extreme weather condition, in the event of a blizzard or a flood. They're essentially claiming that they need militarized equipment to fight climate change, to respond to climate change. Are they not merciful? Now, of course, that's not really what they used this military vehicle for. Now, the sheriff at the time said this: essentially, it's really a rescue, recovery, and transport vehicle. And it didn't really turn out that way. In reality, Iowa City Police, who share use of the vehicle with the sheriff's office, staged it near last year's racial justice protests, where officers fired tear gas at peaceful protesters for refusing to disperse. And this May, residents fumed after police drove the former war machine through a predominantly black neighborhood to serve arrest warrants. Awesome. Now, why is this happening? It's actually common sense when you really think about it. For far too long, Americans have kind of been complacent. They've turned the other way as our government has poured so much of our resources into defense spending. As the country has, the government, I should say, has engaged in war after war, conflict after conflict, and of course, all of that is meant to drum up more support for more military spending. But when you spend that much money, think about it, we're gonna spend $7.5 trillion on defense over the next decade. When you spend that much money to enrich defense contractors, the military is gonna have a surplus of weaponry, of these types of vehicles. And what are they gonna do with all that stuff? Well, they're gonna look for a place to sell it, place to, store it. And wow, why don't we just give it to local police departments? And so throughout the years, police have become more and more militarized because they're literally taking military equipment and weapons from the Pentagon, which has this surplus. I'm really glad that this country's got its priorities straight, right? While you have all of these lawmakers, Democratic lawmakers, pretending to be so concerned about the $3.5 trillion price tag attached to the human infrastructure bill, the bill that would actually improve Americans' lives. Behind the scenes, they're like, yo, can we get a little more funding for defense because my defense contractor friends are legally bribing me to provide more money for them. Okay. So now the city council in Iowa City is trying to figure out what to do. They want to do away with this vehicle. In fact, one Johnson County city council member says this: it's a vehicle made for wartime circumstances, and in my honest opinion, it doesn't belong here. You know what? Janice is right. It doesn't belong there. And if you don't believe me, why don't we take a look at what these vehicles look like. Now, this video is from the Palm Bay Police Department in Florida, but it's a similar militarized vehicle. It's known as the MRAP. Let's see if this belongs in city streets, in suburbs, if this is really what we want our police departments to have.
A lot of the equipment that came on the vehicle was standard. We'll start here. Here is the winch that came with the MRAP. Here are the siren boxes that we had installed after. You can see here one of the light bars that was installed and a heavy floodlight on top over the two windows there. On the very top is our turret, which also has ballistic properties, as well as the windows as well as the armor that surrounds and frames out the windows. The windows there serve as observation for the operators are inside the vehicle, especially since the truck is so high. So if you look up there, we have a turret, which is a good observation point that is used by some of the operators during particular scenarios where we have to drive the truck up nice and close, get a good vantage point. The MRAP provides that for us.
Oh, ballistic properties, awesome. So think about that. Our tax money gets redistributed to private defense contractors, makes them incredibly rich, and then the machinery, the weaponry that they produce for the military then gets transferred over to local police departments and gets used against us. Awesome. The program is known as 1033. It's the 1033 program. And believe it or not, as bad as it was from the very beginning, it's only gotten worse because when no one was paying attention, Congress decided to loosen up some of the regulations associated with the Pentagon giving this type of stuff to local police departments. Last year, Congress made a little notice tweak to the 1033 program to give priority access for armored vehicles to police and sheriff's departments that claim to need them for disaster-related emergencies, HuffPost has learned, with few checks on how the vehicles are ultimately used. Look, I mean, there's gridlock in Congress unless it comes to brutalizing their own constituents with military-grade machinery. HuffPost exclusively obtained hundreds of requests for armored vehicles that local agencies wrote to the Defense Department in 2017 and 2018. And in contrast to just a few years earlier, when almost no law enforcement agencies mentioned natural disasters, there were agencies from virtually every state pleading for help with disaster preparedness. They're just looking out for us, okay? This is America's version of responding to the climate emergency. Duh, that's what this is about. And before Congress had even made any changes to the 1033 program, the Pentagon was already giving police some cues, okay? Within the past few years, on the forms that police and sheriffs must submit to justify their request for armored vehicles, the Pentagon began to list natural disasters as an example justification. By the way, they can claim that they need this equipment, these vehicles, these weapons, whatever it is, to respond to anything, even if they claim that they're responding to the climate emergency. But there's no oversight, like there's no regulation, there's no way of ensuring that that's what they're using it for. So they can lie, and they can use the MRAP for whatever they want, serving warrants, intimidating protesters. Last year, while there were protests in every major city in this country to reform policing, we didn't get police reform from Congress. There was no movement on a federal level. But they did pass this. The Congress passed this. Think about the timing of this. And it tells you everything you need to know about how things really work in government. It's unbelievable. Except it's really not. None of this should surprise anyone. No one should be appeased by a Black Lives Matter mural in front of Trump Tower. That's just meant to give you the illusion of change and reform. It's just an empty gesture. Let's just keep it real, guys. You know it, Okay, members of Congress kneeling in kente cloths is insulting, because it's nothing more than performative garbage to try to placate voters, when in reality, behind the scenes, they're signing off on this kind of stuff, making it easier for local police departments to obtain military-grade vehicles to terrorize their own communities that they're supposed to be serving and protecting. That's the way Congress really works. So anytime you see a Democratic lawmaker engage in any type of pandering for any type of marginalized group, be super skeptical about it Because talk is cheap. What are they actually doing legislatively? Because police reform seems like it's a thing of the past. They're not doing anything about that. But they had no problem loosening up restrictions to pass off Pentagon equipment to local police departments.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.